Good day, everybody. I'm really excited to be here at AI Expo Africa and get a chance to talk to you about the digital frontier. We all know that technology, especially artificial intelligence, is a great accelerator, and it's definitely triggering the fourth industrial revolution. I know there's a lot of people wondering what they could do with it, which is why I wrote the book On the AI Revolution, because I really believe that we have a chance for all of us to make a difference. But we know that there are some inequality gaps out there. And so will technology like AI be the great divider, or is it actually a solution? So let's explore. Unfortunately, in the world today, there is a lot of inequality, not just financial, but in terms of gender and inclusion. And there's a great divide between the have and the have-nots. And it impacts us really across the board. If we look at some of the information that the World Bank Group actually provides to us, we know that there's a huge disparity in the way that household income is actually increased over 15 years from 2001 to 2015. We see that, unfortunately, the bottom 10% are not rising as fast as the rest of the population, and the top 10% are rising very fast. And the sources of household income, jobs, all these things, is not really keeping pace between the two. And what's making it worse is we know there's going to be a lot of great jobs now and actually in the future. They're going to be highly skilled jobs. And the ability of people to be able to do this work is really based on what you actually have available. So if you think about like STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, there's going to be huge demand. But you think about that child that grows up and where they're given like a tablet at 2 years old, and even though just kind of messing around with it, they actually do learn certain things, they get exposed to certain things, they have the tools, the infrastructure to actually tap into and learn at a young age and develop their foundational skill set. Compare that to a 2-year-old child in a underserved community where they may not only not have the tablet, but may not have access to some of the basic needs for living. It creates actually this big disparity between the two. And we've unfortunately seen that this actually translates across the board, in that if you don't get that kind of leg up or exposure younger, when you go to school, you may not get into the advanced classes or the honors classes, some of these things. And it's really unfortunately increasing this divide between the haves and the have-nots. And we don't just see this, like I said, across income, we see it across gender, even some nationalities and ethnicities. So is technology like AI going to be an acceleration and further increase this divide? Or is it actually an opportunity to try and bring things together? Well, one of the biggest challenges that we actually have is what are the tools we can actually access? And this is where we have kind of the analog versus the digital world. I actually sat in a very big county school board meeting in the United States about 10 years ago. And most of the people on the board are very wealthy donors. And they were making the big, discussion around, tablets and books are heavy and, turning students' backs. Why not make them move to ebooks? Right? Everyone got excited. So this is a great idea. And, I spoke up and said, okay, I get what you're saying. But what about those communities that are, again, they're below the poverty line, they can't afford a tablet? How are they going to be able to access their textbooks? And I remember this one woman looking at me like I was crazy. She's like, what are you talking about? My household, we have 5 tablets and there's only 4 of us. I mean, everyone's got a tablet. I was like, well, you're talking about some communities in this county where people live on food stamps. And unfortunately, that's one of the big challenges that we have is some of the people that are the decision makers or the influencers don't necessarily understand the problems on the ground. And so they understand that, well, you might live in the digital world and have all sets of opportunities and great ideas. It doesn't mean, unfortunately, that everybody else can take advantage of the same. They may not have the same resources available, and so what do we do with them? Even now in the time of COVID-19, where a lot of the schools are being run virtually, there's still the problem, like even with online teaching, people need high-speed internet, right? They need a stable connection, and you've got lots of families out there where they're basically giving their kids a flip phone and hoping for the best. And we all know that's not right, but what can we actually do about it, right? And is this really as big of a problem as we think? Ultimately, will we all converge together? Well, let's take a look at an example here. So I'm going to play a video. There's not really much audio, so don't worry about that. But take a look at what this gentleman is doing and what happens with that robotic arm. So you can see he's controlling that robotic arm, right? And this is a testament to the power of technology like artificial intelligence, right? We know that if you lose a limb or you're born without a limb, your brain can still send signals to the stump. And I know a lot of people have been trying to figure out, can we decrypt our brains and figure out the sequence of neurons firing, decode all this? Well, here's a good example where technologists and domain experts like, doctors and physicians come together and actually solve the problem, because trying to move your limb is actually a series of chain events. And part of that chain is muscle and tendon motion. So you look if just above that gentleman's right elbow, you'll see a black band there. Well, that's actually a sensor device. And what it's doing is detecting the muscles and tendons that are moving, and they're using machine learning to try and decode what those motions would translate into. So is this guy trying to make a fist, a thumbs up, and so forth. Really powerful solution, right? Fantastic use of like AI and IoT, because we can actually restore mobility to someone that doesn't have or lost a limb. The question though becomes is who can actually take advantage of this, right? Who can actually design and implement these solutions, and who actually gets to use it? And this is where the digital divide unfortunately comes into play. So we talk about the haves and the have-nots. This is the problem that we see. Even though we have this fantastic technology that could really do a lot of good in the world, there's two big challenges in trying to make sure everyone can use this. The first is the infrastructure. If you come from, not as robust age, if you don't have, forget about 5G or 4G, what if you're still analog? What if you don't have the computing speed? What if you don't have high-speed internet? What if you don't even have stable electricity to keep things charged? It presents a challenge in trying to use this technology. It also unfortunately limits the people what they can actually do, develop, and innovate, because they just don't have the tool set to advance like that. Second big challenge is access. We could probably all agree this is fantastic, useful technology, and be absolutely phenomenal if everyone that had lost a limb could get access to, a robotic arm or foot and this technology to be able to control it. The question is who actually will get access? Does this become a right for people, or does it become something that only for the wealthy that can afford this type of solution? That's one of the other big challenges that we have is, even if we develop fantastic solutions, how do we actually distribute it for people? And if it's based on cost, that might rule a lot of communities out. So very big challenges, I know. But I believe what James Dyson actually said, that life is a mountain of solvable problems, and I enjoy that. I really do enjoy solving problems, and I think we all should. Like the infrastructure, the access problems are not unknowns to us. Can we do things about them? Yes, absolutely, right? We know we can build the infrastructure. We know we can subsidize costs, or even government programs and nonprofits could step in and help defray those costs and help with distribution. But all this stuff takes time, effort, and money. And we know that there are fantastic people working to do that. But one of the other drivers we don't talk that much about is sometimes if you build it, day will come, so to speak. That if we come with something that is very innovative or even earth-shattering, it will actually force some of these infrastructure and access changes, which means that we actually need to take a look and figure out, is there a way we can actually bring some of these things to bear? Which means that we need to be able to empower people and help them use this technology to accelerate some of these changes. So rather than artificial intelligence and other emerging technology be the great divider, it's actually an opportunity to be a solution for some of these problems that we have. Rather than increase the inequality gap, we might actually be able to use it to shrink the gap and enable a better access or opportunity in the future for everybody. So the $1 million question is, how do we do that? Well, I actually find that the countries that right now are, behind in some of this stuff actually have a huge advantage over the other communities, other nations. I really look at this as a leapfrog opportunity because they're not bound to an existing infrastructure and they're not bound to existing ideas. Consider, the rise of mobile phones and mobile devices. North America and Europe, in large part, grew up with phones, widely distributed, widely accessible, but they started off as landlines. So, everyone had a phone at home. They were much slower to build out a mobile infrastructure and drive mobile adoption. If I remember my numbers right, I think by 2000, you had about 2/3 penetration in North America and Europe for mobile phones. But you look at a country like China or, places in Africa or South America, mobile phone adoption was over 90%. And that was very much a leapfrog opportunity. Why? Because they didn't have the aging, telephone landline infrastructure. They could actually build a new and not worry about, okay, I have to maintain the old, build a new, do a transition, do a lot of costs, and it takes time and effort. But the big advantage that happened, especially in Africa and China, was by making the leap and kind of skipping that landline, era, it actually accelerated their ability in terms of mobile solutions. You look at some of the world leaders now in mobile payments, they're not really in Europe or North America. They're actually out of Africa and China in particular, because their adoption rate was so much higher, right? It fueled this acceleration into the space. And given all the challenges that we have, we know with some of the infrastructure and other things, I think there's this leapfrog opportunity as well. That we know that some people are working to solve the infrastructure access problems, but if we take advantage of the leapfrog effect, we'll actually be able to provide a whole suite or portfolio of cutting edge solutions that will accelerate that change to help build the necessary infrastructure and improve access for everybody. So one great example of this is actually robotics in Africa. So agriculture or in ag tech are actually very big things. There's always concern is, can we grow enough food to feed the people, feed the world? Food production, food safety, food distribution have become key things. And so, AI companies like Robotics are actually working to do that. We know that using AI and IoT, we have tons of data on weather, soil content, potential pest infestations, water usage. All these things play a factor, and actually using like AI and other things to actually do things like that. So we can actually detect like a pest infestation very early when it occurs, rather than when it becomes visible to our eyes. At that point, it's a much larger problem. There are actually farmers in Bangladesh that are using AI solutions created by people where they're getting an optimal mix of how much water and topsoil you use, what crops to plant, where they're essentially actually using about 20% of the resources, 20% less resources in the topsoil, about 1/3 less water, but they're improving their crop yields about 30 to 40%. And this is actually in areas that are where the land is not that good farm-wise, like the topsoil is not that strong, but it shows you the capabilities that we have. We're even seeing things now where we have AI tools that even help us say, like, you know what, if you plant your seed 2 millimeters to the right, it'll improve your crop yield 8%. So this is the power of AI and big data and IoT coming together, but in a simplistic way that, you know, a farmer in an underserved community, you know, with limited resources can actually take advantage of it. That the tool set's made simple. It doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. It doesn't require 5G connection, for example, lots of storage, but addresses a huge, huge need. Another area is around financial inclusion and financial sustainability. So there's actually a company called Mosabi, and what they're focusing on are microloans. So they're working in like Ghana and Paraguay right now, where they realized in some of these small communities, a little microloan can actually make a huge difference. Where somebody that might need, you know, 100, 200 euro can make a little improvement for their business, and it would actually drive systemic change, meaning that it would, the return off that investment would generate a lot more income, that it potentially could hire more people. The extra money goes into the community, so that helps with other jobs, helps build schools and hospitals. But the challenge is in some of these communities, it's not like they have access to a bank right away. And like I know in some parts of Ghana, they're saying that, you know, the bank representative might show up, but they might show up every 3 or 4 months. And so even if you want to know something or do a microloan, the opportunities to access that are actually very limited. So the person might come, you might talk to them, you might have to think about it or figure something out or do the paperwork and then wait for them to return. So getting a loan could take a long time. So what Mosabi has done is they've actually built an app to facilitate those microloans so that you can actually do everything through a mobile device at a low speed connection. And the interesting thing that Mosabi realized was, while this helped bridge the gap for that connection and accelerate the time to get a microloan, not everyone knew if they needed a microloan or if it made sense for them or where they could actually invest the money in. And so they took it a step further and using AI and machine learning, create localized financial literacy programs, which they give away for free. So they basically help people understand how money and cash flow works and how money flows through a community and the importance of that and how to identify opportunities where a small amount of capital might make a big difference for your business. And that would actually then fuel that people, the opportunities recognizing, well, maybe I could use a small sum of money and increase my production, increase my output, and help my community. So another great example of tapping into this, but with demand coming up, guess what's happening, right? That's now the growth in some of these communities that's now triggering investment into infrastructure. So not just hospitals and schools, but also improving some of the connection speeds, improving even some of the the electrical infrastructure, that there's more stable electricity. And so it becomes this kind of ripple effect where doing, again, something small has actually helped then address the infrastructure and access problems. Healthcare is another huge one going on right now. So there's a lot of investment right now into non-invasive technologies, or even using tablets, where the nearest doctor might be 70, 80 kilometers away, and someone suffers an injury or an illness. You have these tablets that are self-contained with a little bit of AI, where a local community member or a villager can take one of these tablets, and the AI will help prompt information. You can use the camera on the tablet to help diagnose and hopefully treat the injured or ill person. And if it's very severe, the AI will say that we need to notify the authorities, and notify a hospital to try and come pick this person up or get a doctor out here. And then the biggest illness in the world is actually loneliness. Before COVID-19, about 40% of the world suffered from some moderate to severe form of loneliness. And people are actually tapping into AI to help address that, to give people an outlet. So not a replacement for human relations and connections, but it helped these people take a first step knowing that there's always someone that's going to listen to them and be there. And unfortunately, especially in these times with the coronavirus, this has taken on an outsized need, especially as a lot of people are suffering either loneliness or, unfortunately, family unrest and domestic violence and child abuse on the rise. That, again, providing these types of tools that don't require heavy infrastructure and are widely accessible are actually providing that outlet. There's actually an organization that's developed something called Rainbow, which is an AI chatbot so that women that are suffering from domestic violence actually have an outlet and talk to. They can actually get questions answered and seek help without fear of being judged or fear of reprisal or fear of, someone, their partner finding out what's going on. So those are just a few examples of what we can do with AI to be a solution to help bridge that inequality gap that we really experience right now. And I know you're probably thinking like, well, this is great, and there's a lot of great ideas out there, but I don't have one, right? How am I going to be able to do this? I'm going to use that to trigger, development and investment to infrastructure and access. Well, I'll share my magic formula with you. So being able to use this successfully and repeatedly with organizations big and small, but it starts with your mindset. It's not problem solution, especially when it comes to AI. It's really mindset, problem defined, domain expertise, combined together create the opportunity. And it's the opportunity with the technical expertise and the infrastructure to help create the solution. So the mindset is really to get into this entrepreneurial thinking mode, right? We have to step away. I know most people don't like change, and our first reaction when we hear a new idea is, well, that's not going to work, or it's never been done before, right? We have to step away and say, let's think about how we make something work. What are the potential options or paths we could take? We may not be able to figure something out, and that's okay, but we tried. And that's the key thing here is we have to be open to trying to figure out how to do something, even if it seems a little out there outside the box. Once we're in that mindset, we have to think about what's the problem I want to solve. And we all have problems, and I'm a big believer that local problems have global solutions. You think about like food production, it's very much a local problem, but it's a problem that exists in most places in the world. So you can develop a solution, hopefully it'll come across. But to do that, it means you have to understand what's really the problem you're tackling, what's driving the problems in food production, what those real root causes are. And then we have to bring in the right domain expertise. The knowledge of the space, for food production, agriculture, or any rules, regulations, might have to know things about supply chain distribution channels, some things around adoption challenges, like, in some communities or countries, like farmers are not allowed to directly sell to the end customer. But you create all these things together, right? You bring this three things together, and this creates the opportunity, or as I like to call it, the art of the possible, what we might be able to do. We then take the opportunity and we marry that with the technical expertise. So we work with the smart AI folks or other emerging technology folks, understand what's actually feasible. So with what my opportunity is, what are the capabilities I can bring to bear, what are those tools of implementation that I have. Plus, we can't ignore the infrastructure. Do I have the right support systems, the system requirements? Do I need, 5G or get away with 2G, things around storage? And once I know what's possible and the parts that I can actually accomplish, that's my solution. That's my possible. And so what can we actually do with this? So here's a great example where we can marry AI with generative design. So generative design is really where we're now tapping into AI, and rather than say, here's how you build a plane or anything like that, we're really saying, this is how a plane works, right? It's got lift, it's got thrust, all these types of things. So if I want to build a new type of plane, I would teach the AI about that and say, here, the plane I want to build has to hold 200 people, has to have a range of 20,000 kilometers, has to have this level of fuel efficiency and so forth. And the AI will actually generate millions upon millions of different designs. And it'll actually fabricate new materials. We've actually seen this actually fabricate new materials that people have never made before as it considers different design options. And it'll take this vast pool and whittle it down to like 4 to 7 top choices that then human engineers will actually review and take a look and see which one might make the best sense. So what can we actually do with this? Well, a great example of this is actually Ollie, which is a self-driving, 3D printable, solar-powered bus. So this was designed by IBM Watson, IBM's AI system. It is 3D printable, complete design by Watson. In fact, it's even even though it's self-driving, it has a little AI virtual driver in there where the passengers can actually have a conversation with it. But it's a fantastic example of AI and generative design in use. One big area right now that everyone's looking at is taking AI and generative design into medicine. So, you were thinking about the coronavirus right now and, the race for a vaccine. We now know that if we teach the AI systems about like viruses and virus genomics and other things about biology, we could actually tap into the power of generative design here with that AI, where would actually take a look at millions of possible viruses that might occur and their possible mutations. And from that, we can actually then figure out which ones are the most likely to occur. And because we have the genomic structure, actually start working on a vaccine before an outbreak actually happens, which means that we might be able to jump in front of epidemics, let alone pandemics. So very powerful use of AI and generative design. But you might be thinking that this is, again, great stuff, but we got this digital divide, right? I get the infrastructure, I get the access concerns, right? I just don't have the tool sets right now, and I hear what you're saying, right? Am I going to get left behind? And I think not really. I think that we have a great opportunity to tap into the power of artificial intelligence, other emerging technologies, and rather than make it for the haves, we can actually extend to the have-nots. And it really starts with these ideas and being able to show the value behind them. Because if the potential is there, the return is there, then the investments into infrastructure will be made, the tools will be made available, the education will be made available, right? There's a lot of great partners to work out on there with these programs to accelerate this, where rather than AI and emerging technology, this digital frontier being the great divider, it could actually be a solution to bridge that gap and shrink that inequality. So I thank you for your time and listening to my talk. I hope that you all will take the opportunity to think about how you can tap into the AI and other technology to be a solution to the inequality gap. If you have any questions or you'd like to reach out, all the delegates and audience members can meet me in the speaker lounge for more Q&A. If we don't have time for that, or there's not enough time, do feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on this slide. And my website, my LinkedIn profile, Twitter, access to my Forbes articles, as well as my podcast, Changing the Story, where I share more of the stories and what people are doing to help make the world a better place. And with that, I hope to hear from you. Keep those ideas coming, and I hope you have a wonderful day.